Hi, this is Lee from the Bar Exam Toolbox. Welcome back. It's another week, which means we are talking about the California bar experiment, which every week just feels more experimental. I don't know. What do you think, Alison?
Yeah, we're just living dangerously
dangerously.
here. Who knows? Who knows what the outcome will be?
All right, today we're going to talk about three things. First, what we know, what's new, what's happened. Second, what we don't know, which is still a surprising amount. And third, thoughts on how you should study for this November 8th and 9th experiment. So, Alison, why don't we start with what's new? What do we know now?
All right. Well, on Tuesday, the California Supreme Court approved some of the things that the Board of Bar Examiners had asked them for. So they did approve the proposal to do the experiment, at least part one, not allowing part two, the written part that would follow the July exam yet. But they are allowing this November 8th and 9th. And they are saying probably they're going to give some type of score boost, but they haven't really said what that's going to look like. But, they're generally on board with it. And another piece of interesting information in that is that it almost certainly will be a totally either remote or test center exam. I guess we can shift to what we don't know. What we don't know is exactly what that will look like. I talked to someone today who registered for the exam in February. And apparently they asked her where she wanted to take it, but didn't really tell her where the test centers were. So we don't know if, for example, this will be like COVID when it was completely online and remote and you didn't have any scratch paper. So that was kind of an issue. All these things are kind of up in the air. They did say that there will be the multiple choice component. It doesn't explicitly say that Kaplan's going to write that, but it does say it will be remote. And the NCB said they won't give them the questions if it's remote. So I think if you read between the lines there, you're going to say somebody else is going to write it. So we assume that Kaplan will be writing those questions, but that's not explicit in this particular order.
Yeah. I think that's still the assumption based on everything that I'm reading is that Kaplan is moving ahead. I hope they've written some of those questions because it takes a long time to write them. So,
well, they also need them in like 2 weeks for the experiment.
Yeah, exactly. There's that too. Other open questions around this, I think, are, it sounds like that everybody's going to need to take the test at the same time, even if you're taking it remotely or in these testing centers. And so that's another consideration that doesn't sound completely fleshed out. How are we going to get access to those testing centers for students that want to take it in that environment? What happens to folks who get accommodations and how is that going to play into all of this? What if you were hoping to handwrite? I don't think handwriting is going to be an option in this administration. So that's very different. There are just lots of open questions still. So, I think you should write to the bar if you've got questions. Yes, I'm not confident that they are going through all of these questions because they're not updating documentation at lightning speed. So I think you should ask if you don't know exactly what the situation will be. It's amazing we still don't know the answers to things, but it is going to look like a different test. It's going to be on your laptop. It's going to be using, remote testing software. You might be able to take it in these testing centers. I guess we'll see what the individual requirements are because I think a lot of people are going to plan on not traveling to California to take it. So that's going to be a big deal considering how many people take it out of state. I saw a statistic today that the bar reported that it was something like 22% of people who apply to the bar have out-of-state addresses. So it's quite a large number.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I knew a lot of people, going to law school in New York who were taking California. So, I do think there are a lot of things to be keeping an eye on. We'll see. The other interesting tidbit that was in that same, I guess, press release or whatever was that they approved some of the kind of very future requests, not an alternate path to licensure, but this idea that I hadn't really paid that much attention to, I'll be honest.
No one
California, kind of drafting its own, what do they call it? The Future California Developed Bar Exam. They're going to add some new subjects. So that'll be fun.
That's exciting.
Apparently, I don't want anyone to freak out about this yet because there's no actual date on this, but just something to be aware of. Maybe you might want to think about taking some of these classes. Admin law and procedure, employment law. I think those are the two biggest ones that jumped out to
Oh,
me.
family
So
law,
yeah, those
which
are
is a little different than community property, really.
true, true. Yeah, I was like, I guess maybe I was on the UBE.
I mean, I took family law and community property, so they are definitely two different classes.
Yeah. No, I mean, I took family law and did not take community property. So I don't know if community property presumably be kind of incorporated into family law, but it's going to be broader. I don't know. Oh, and then actually I see in like estate planning, will and trust is estate planning, trust, and probate.
Hmm,
So that'll be fun.
probate. I haven't seen that class at most
I
law
haven't seen
schools.
that one. Yeah. So anyway, we're not going to talk about this now because it's in the future.
Hmm.
But as we've seen in California, the future can arrive really
Very,
fast.
very
So
fast. Just the cutting edge over here. Cutting edge.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think everyone needs to take a collective deep breath and realize that things are still in flux. But for those of you that are planning to take the November 8th and 9th experiment, 8th or 9th experiment, we did want to touch on how we think you should be preparing. So you should have heard from the bar and got offered a spot in this. If you didn't, you should follow up with them. Because I have heard that everybody's gotten an email saying that they are getting to participate. I think the big question is like, how do you prepare for a test that there are no outlines and there are no sample questions for? Well, ironically, you use other licensed questions from other providers that are probably going to cause a big intellectual property dispute here pretty soon. And that's the best we got. So I think we still go back to our good friends at UWorld and Adaptabar, and you sign up for those and you start preparing like you would be preparing for the MBE, assuming that the questions will be similar enough in style and similar enough in what is tested. I think if you are just starting to study nowish because you just got that email, I know. How do you do it as fast as possible? So you don't really have that much time. And I think you really want to focus on heavily tested areas of the law. I would assume that they're going to be similar. So, we've talked about that on our podcasts, but, thinking about what's the most heavily tested, don't get bogged down in the rule against perpetuities, not that heavily tested. But you've got to do practice and you've got to get familiar with these questions. And you don't want to do like 500 of them. You want to do as many of them as you can in the few weeks you have left.
Right. But at the same time, I think if somebody's a 3L listening to this or if somebody's working, I mean, the reality is you're not going to have a ton of time.
That's true.
So I would just not drive yourself totally crazy. There's no way you're going to get up to speed completely on like every aspect of what could be covered on the MBE and be practicing those questions and be able to do them. I mean, that's a pretty big ask for what's literally like, I'm not even sure 2 weeks away at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it could be 2.5.
I don't actually think it is. We're recording this on October 24th. That's the 8th, 24, 31.
It's like
I
2
mean,
weeks.
yeah, just at 2
Yeah,
weeks.
it's just a 2 week. I think that that's true. I mean, you're going to have limited time. I think the best use of your time is probably not just reviewing outlines, but it is doing practice questions because that at least helps you get used to the style of questions, especially if you've never taken the multiple choice before. I think if you're a repeat taker, you can take some of the information that you got on your score report. Of course, in California, you haven't gotten that score report yet unless you took it a couple administrations ago, but you may know what your weaker areas are and want to spend some extra time on that. But I think the reality is you don't want to just go in cold if you can avoid it, because I think that's going to feel really crummy if you just take this test without any preparation. So you should do your best. Try to get a passing score, whatever that might be, because that's also one of the things we don't know.
Right. And if you have no materials at all at this point, I would probably recommend getting the Smart Bar Prep outlines. They're like $100-ish. You can save them for later. They're good to have. They're nice and short. You can sit down with them with some questions, maybe even go through open book a few of them, and then try to do some closed book ones because, you have a couple of weeks.
But here's the benefit. It's not as long as the MBE, so you don't have to worry as much about fatigue, which is great because this is a shorter experiment. So yay for that. But you still are going to have questions from all the 7 subjects in theory. That's what we've been told.
Yeah. So I would say, if you're doing this, you can make a good faith effort. You can give it your best shot, but ultimately recognize there's a very limited period of time. Most people study this for several months, not 2 weeks. So if it doesn't feel great walking out, it probably doesn't have any real bearing on your ability to actually pass the bar
Fair
exam.
point. I think it's good to keep it in perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So give it your best shot.
Yeah.
See what you can do with
Yeah.
it.
All right. Well, I think that's all we know and don't know for this. What is this update number 4 on the
I think we
California?
might be on number
Are we already
5
on
by
number
now. I'm
5?
not
I
quite
don't know. There are a
sure.
lot of them.
Yeah.
There are a lot of them if you want to hear more entertaining ones. I feel like now it's just kind of like deliberate and sad when we talk about what's funny and surreal. But anyway, check out our other videos if you want to be entertained on our feelings about this as it has unfolded. But we'll be back with more updates as we hear them. And if you are taking the experiment on the 8th and 9th, I think it'd be cool if people would leave some comments and share how they're getting ready to prepare.
Oh, yeah. I'd love to hear that. And everyone can subscribe so you won't miss any updates whenever they come out. And join us at barexamtoolbox.com if you want some extra help.